one small change that we made was that after looking at the pipeline and looking at all the deals associated to the various stages, I had a hard time with what was in discovery for my AEs. So I decided that discovery no longer existed as a stage for my account executives, and anything that was actually in their pipeline had to be qualified or above.
Welcome to Revenue Insights. We're joined by revenue leaders from some of the highest growth companies. Together, we explore how they built their revenue teams, the journeys they've been on, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Revenue Insights is brought to you by Ebsta. We're an AI-first revenue intelligence platform designed to help you close more deals, retain more customers, and forecast better. Enjoy the podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Revenue Insights podcast. Today, I am thrilled to have Lauren Boynton on today with us. Lauren is the Vice President of Sales at Qstream. With over 13 years of experience in both customer success, project management, and sales enablement, Lauren has played a pivotal role in driving sales process optimization for various high-growth companies. At Qstream, Lauren is leading the charge in optimizing the sales process, not only to accelerate growth, but also enhance customer outcomes. Lauren's extensive background in both sales and customer success gives her a unique perspective on how to drive efficiency and effective change across sales teams. Welcome to the show, Lauren.
Thank you, Guy, and lovely to be here.
So, Lauren, you've had a diverse career spanning various leadership roles in sales and customer success. What initially sparked your interest in the field of sales enablement, and how did your journey lead you into the current role at Qstream?
Sure, absolutely. It's a great question. So funny enough, I went to school to be a film major, and it was my primary concentration was on writing scripts. So when I graduated, I ended up falling into a television-based role. I was behind the camera. Then I moved into actually managing live sets. And I really enjoyed the project management aspect of it because it was, super rewarding. Obviously in television, it's very exciting. So it was a great challenge for me. When the recession hit in 2009, we ended up having to lay off 40% of the business. So at that point, I took a step back and ended up finding a position at Thomson Reuters, where I went over to their webcast division and as a project manager. And that started kind of paving the way for me to delve into software. And one day, a former colleague called me up and said, "Hey, I'm at a company called Brainshark, and I think you'd really be interested in it." So it went from there, just an interview, and I ended up joining their customer success team. And really, it was around implementing the Brainshark software, really understanding the goals of the customer. And from there, it sort of opened my eyes into what was possible with my career. I had never envisioned that software would be an opportunity for me, but I always like to try new things out. I have a very curious personality, so it just fit well for me to dive into that role at Brainshark. And I was initially, the roles that I was in early in my career, both at Qstream and Brainshark, have been from more of a consultancy and project management standpoint. But I always seem to get dragged into being in more of a managerial leadership role. I think I'm just bossy that way. My natural talents just kind of align with that. So once I moved on from Brainshark, I came into Qstream really because I loved the idea of what the platform stood for. It was really about generally just making the everyday worker better at what they do, better at their job, and to be able to give them that training without having to pull them from their day-to-day job. And I felt like that was such an empowering position, and it really was something that resonated to me. So when I came over to Brainshark 10 years ago almost, it was to join their implementation and consultancy team and to help customers be able to, once the sale had happened, to be able to launch their Qstream. And then instead of just working with them as I did with Brainshark for kind of a small period of time on their implementation, our consultants stay with the customer for the period that they are, in fact, a customer with us. So that way, we're constantly helping them to grow their Qstream journey, making sure that we're always aligning to their business goals. And I felt like that was something that really stood out for me in the long run. And I think that also opened my eyes to the idea that, what customer success looks like, and the idea of being able to upsell or sell, who else at your organization could benefit from this, because it's harder to do that when you're only doing a 90-day implementation. So being with the customer for that longer period of time allows for you to do selling in the role. So I would say from that standpoint, that's when I first kind of started to have that foray into, sorry, let me restart. I would say that would have been the first time that I had been exposed to sales, but in, I think, a more natural capacity for someone like myself who've had the project management background. So sorry, that was probably long-winded, but
No, I love it. Really fascinating. We don't come across that many sales leaders that started from that kind of project management, their CS background. So it's fascinating to hear that the journey that you went through, and I suppose it gives you a set of skills where you are much more kind of customer centric than most sales leaders, and really empathetic to the challenges that the customers are facing. And it's fascinating to hear that the sellers that you're responsible for, they continue to hold the relationship with the customer for how long? For not just through the implementation, but for the life cycle of the customer?
not only do our consultants, who are our project managers, hold on to those accounts for the entirety of the life cycle, but also our sales team as well. So prior to me coming into the role of head of sales, I was actually the customer success director reporting into the VP of sales. And my team at that point, we were responsible for the renewal, but expansion business. So really leveraging, again, those relationships to expand their business and to help us to achieve, our internal revenue goals by doing so. So that was really where I first started to kind of come into the role. And I sort of just fell into it, to be honest with you. It was a couple of years ago. We had a new CEO who's with us today, Dan Whalen, come into the role. And I think the challenge that he put forth to all of us was, how can we retain more of our customers? Just by retaining the customers we have today would, allow for additional growth for Qstream. So how can we do that? How can we make that our focus? So initially, I was working on that initiative from the services side of the business, but more so it felt the need for more ownership and more responsibility and accountability for that just sort of naturally kind of came together, which is why I say I kind of fell into sales, because really I just wanted to help the organization to retain more customers. But naturally it meant by retaining those customers, I had to understand what made them a customer in the first place and how to keep them as a customer. So that was really the focus for me coming into customer success. And then I realized that I actually had I always joke around how sales should be fun, but I really enjoyed the negotiation part of it. And I always say my favorite part is kind of going back and forth with the client and really understanding their goals and charming them to some extent with what we put in front of them. We used to have a kind of an old adage at Qstream, and we still bring it up, but it was that we like to delight our customers. So I always sort of keep that in the back of my mind, that what we do every day is fun. It's enjoyable. It's a great platform to work with. We have amazing customers. So every time I approach a customer is from the standpoint of, here's what we're doing today for you. What can we be doing better? And I think that really resonates. And so, yeah, I've reluctantly kind of come in through that trajectory just because I find it fun and innovative and allows me to express my passion for bringing great products into the market.
No, it's fascinating. I think, are you still responsible for the success team as well, or are you?
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah. So the way that our team is aligned today, previously we did kind of carve out a number of our sales executives as customer success consultants. They were responsible for renewals and expansion, but it felt very disjointed. So once I came over and took over head of sales, we decided to eliminate that role and just reconvert them back into account executives. So my team today not only has their standing book of business that they're responsible for the renewal and expansion, they're also responsible for new business. And then one of those individuals is also responsible for our partner channel. So quite busy, but it's fun, and it allows us to have, really our pulse on the market by having the reps have that focus, but it's also important for us to have a very strong BDR program to be able to work with our team.
No, but makes a lot of sense. We've been, most of our listeners will know we produce our annual B2B benchmark report every year. And one of the things we're introducing for the 2025 benchmark report, which we're launching in January, is really looking at where the majority of our business's revenues come from, right? It's not new logo. It's from the existing customer base. And we've been looking at a lot about the signals that are driving revenue within the retention and upsell cross-sell space. And what's been fascinating, you mentioned earlier, we all buy into this principle that relationships drive revenue, but really understanding which relationships are important and how influential they are on revenue has been an incredible learning curve for me this year. And some of the takeaways, again, I'm going to share a few of the secrets that are coming out next month, but the cross-sell upsell outcomes are 7 times more likely if you've run the last 2 QBRs with the C-level within the business that you're selling to, and the chance of churn is 4 times higher if the last 2 QBRs have been done with a junior resource, someone below a VP. So what's been fascinating is really getting under the skin of, not all QBRs are equal, and not all relationships are equal, and really knowing, having visibility of which personas which we're actually engaging with, and making sure that we're consistent in that approach is really everything. So it's a fascinating approach, and amazing to see how you're blending, the whole go-to-market team into one function.
I love those 2 stats, and I was writing them down to share with my team. I hope you don't mind. So you make a fantastic point about personas, and one that we've definitely been exploring. So as part of the sales process optimization, part of my job, and it's funny, coming from a project management background, I think it's no surprise that I would approach the role with that mindset and look for ways to drive efficiencies. So one of the big sort of functions of my role has been around forecasting accuracy, but I can't forecast accurately if my data hygiene, isn't great or isn't where it should be. So a lot of the role that I've had is really getting into the nitty gritty and understanding all of the deals and all of our customers. And as part of that, driving my team to really understand their account base. And stakeholder management is one that across the board with services and sales, we have been really driving an initiative between the 2 departments to understand who are all of the various players within our accounts, and to make sure that we understand who are the decision makers. And that's part of also the methodology that we ended up bringing on board last year, is to understand those decision makers and who do we need to bring into the fold to make sure that, we're not just talking to the junior, players within the organization who really have no say at the end of the day where that budget goes, or how it's going to impact, and if it's even impacting any business goals internally.
No, I absolutely buy into that. I think the big breakthrough we've seen this year is the influence AI can have on this part of the business. Because while sales people are very good at building relationships and trust, and ultimately getting customers to buy into a business case, the areas they're less strong at is actually the area that AI is really good at, right? So, picking up that consistent approach to the admin, so that the data is good and consistent and maintained, means that you as a leader have the insights, can transfer that data into insights and use it to really understand how the team are performing and where they need support training. And I think that's it's an amazing thing to see at the moment, and the transformation we're seeing in the front office around, and how AI is not necessarily replacing those salespeople, because in fact, relationships are absolutely even more important than ever before, but freeing them up to be able to do their job. And most importantly, having such a big impact on management, because suddenly all those things we were cracking the whip over, trying to get the salespeople every Friday afternoon, have you done all your admin? Have you updated everything in the system? And of course, it's even if they do it, it's never consistent, right? And if they've got an extra hour, suddenly they're writing a whole paragraph for everything that they need to do. And if they're out of time, it's 1-word answers on everything, right? So the AI is able to have a much more consistent approach to, capturing information about, what objections are raised, which personas we're engaging with. And you mentioned a methodology. Have you picked a specific? Are you using a BANT or a SPICE or a MEDIC?
Yeah, so we're working with Winning by Design, their SPICE methodology, and that is one. We've had a few methodologies in house, and I think we've learned something from each of them. But this one I think has really aligned to how we sell internally because it is solution selling, and it does allow us to be able to build those relationships. It's also has driven. We work on a lot with reinforcement, obviously, because we're in the micro learning space, and behavior change. And a big element for me coming into the role was that when I was looking at the pipeline, trying to distinguish what was real, what were real deals that could actually, move through the sales cycle, and who were the tire kickers to some extent, right? So having the first two pieces of the SPICE methodology, which is understanding their situation and their pain, really helped me to be able to have better conversations with the team because we were sort of getting those two elements out of the way where you might not uncover those till later on in utilizing other sales methodologies. So a lot of our pipeline, I would say, is converting quicker. And what's in the pipeline at later stages is much more real because of the changes that we've made implementing the sales methodology. And I think what you said about artificial intelligence, if someone were to say to me a year ago how it was impacting my role today, I think I would be slightly surprised, or how often I interact with AI in my day to day. I think we all are a little shocked. For us internally at Qstream, we have embedded it within our solution. So one area is just content generation and being able for me to have some Qstream questions created for my team if I need to go in and reinforce a new process that I'm rolling out, and allows me to be able to move far more quickly as a sales leader rather than having to take that time to generate new content, which can take time. I can kind of speed up the process. And then the path that we're leaning into is really around those insights that you're talking about, or as a sales leader, I can uncover those gaps. A lot of what's come to focus for me in the past several months, just kind of planning out and building my strategy for next year, is I've been looking a lot at the historical data, like what does the data tell me, but then using AI to validate and understanding the market, where a lot of the research that I need that would take me probably days and weeks, I can do in share minutes to say, this is what I'm thinking. Does this align with where we're going in the path? So I think for me as a sales leader, I think it's never been a more fun or engaging time to be a sales leader because of the access that we have to be able to validate kind of gut instinct to some extent.
No, I absolutely buy into that. Well, one of the big things that we did this year, so we analyzed 4.7 million opportunities in the last 12 months. And one of the things that we see a lot, it deals kind of closing lost at a late stage 5, 6 in your sales cycle. And very little information about why those deals close lost. And what we've done recently, are you using any call recording tech? I know everyone seems to love these tools that can take the call recordings and give you some insights. But so what we did is we extended our AI engine to be able to go back historically and look at the call recordings associated to deals that closed won and lost in the past. And what was fascinating was that so often the deals that closed at late stage actually were never qualified correctly in the first place. And when you look back and understand and use the AI to kind of score the qualification, and SPICE is a great one to use. I'm a big fan. And the bow tie, of course. So what's amazing is you start to see a kind of consistent pattern. And in hindsight, it's so inefficient to be taking customers through a whole sales cycle when you haven't qualified them correctly in the first place. And we spend, and so for me, this space is so exciting at the moment because revenue intelligence is only starting to become real. And it feels like sales is the very last department to be data driven. And we spend probably 80% of our time working on things that never yield results. And so if we can start to take advantage of this data-driven approach and understand what's working and what's not, and the AI can give us the insights we need, the opportunity to become more productive isn't just kind of single digit here and there. It's huge. And it's not just about generating more revenue. We can increase the growth rate for the business and ultimately lead to a higher valuation, all just by becoming more efficient in this area of the front office.
One small change that we made was that after looking at the pipeline and looking at all the deals associated to the various stages, I had a hard time with what was in discovery for my AEs. So I decided that discovery no longer existed as a stage for my account executives, and anything that was actually in their pipeline had to be qualified or above. And so that meant that we were more so looking at the lead stage and saying, okay, this is an AE qualified lead, or there's just but the discovery piece either happens before it's a qualified opportunity, but it's not happening when we've already converted it to an opportunity. And I think that was a huge change for the team, but it's made my life so much easier because what I'm looking at now in the pipeline is just it's qualified deals. And I'm not spending that time to try and understand if something's been in discovery for, 5 months. Is this real or not? Right. So, for me, it was just I needed to sort of clean house to some extent. And that was one of the small changes. And I think with sales process optimization, what I found is that sometimes small change can yield big results. And just because you've always done something one way doesn't mean you can't change it. And I think that is the benefit of working for, a smaller company, because you do have that flexibility and you can pivot on a dime and make and implement those changes for the benefit of the team.
We'll return to the episode in a moment. This podcast is brought to you by Ebsta. Every year, we produce the B2B Sales Benchmarks Report. It provides insights from the analysis of billions of revenue dollars, revealing what attributes drive top sales performance and highlighting where time and money are wasted. To get early access to this year's Benchmarks Report, sign up for our newsletter at ebsta.com/newsletter. Now, back to Revenue Insights.
I absolutely buy into that. And one of the interesting kind of data points that came out of the reports was looking at the timing stage. And when you analyze, if you're only doing 4 or 5 deals a year, it's very different. But if you've got thousands of deals coming through the business, and you'll start to see patterns of number of days they spend in stage when they win versus when they lose. And almost always the time spent in stage when you lose is a whole lot longer than when you win. And so understanding that velocity is absolutely key. And if you're able to keep the momentum moving forward, if every week the deals are progressing, the win rates are so much higher. As soon as you pass the average number of days at stage when you win, the win rates drop off a cliff. And that momentum is absolutely key. And even things like getting meetings cancelled, if you have 2 meetings cancelled in a row, has a big impact on win rates. And even if you don't get the next meeting booked within 7 days, it doesn't need to happen within 7 days. But if you don't get the next, it's that kind of don't leave the meeting until you've got the next one in the diary, right? If you don't, if it takes more than 7 days to get the next one in the diary, the chances are you've lost your momentum. You're not actually in a process anymore. And it's and again, you just by our job, I think, as leaders is to analyze the data, turn it into insights, and make it super easy for all of our sales teams to digest. Because one of the things we've seen, we recently introduced a brand guarantee where we guarantee to get more reps hitting quota within 6 months. And the reason we're so confident of that is that there's a driving force within the AEs, even if they're the individual contributors, even if they are a BLC player, they all have a consistent theme in that they all want to win. And when you can make it really easy for them to understand, look, our win rates are 12% when we've only got 3 stakeholders actively involved. But when we have 6 or more, our win rate's up at 35%. When you show it to them in a picture, suddenly the penny drops and now they get it. Now they understand why you kept going on about engaging with those personas. Or, one of the other takeaways this year in particular was the influence of the finance persona on win rates. And if you can get that finance persona involved in that business case building, rather than just being involved at the end when you're presenting them back a solution, the win rates, I think, are 14% higher. So all of these things kind of influence. When you show it to the team, suddenly they understand why you're driving them to be much more consistent. And I think the point you made there about smaller teams being able to pivot is absolutely key. But you have to start from a place where everyone's doing things in the same way, because then it's not that difficult to pivot. But if everyone's going off in wildly different directions, you're going to get wildly different results.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I meet with my team. I have one-on-ones frequently, but I speak with my team members at least multiple times a day. But I think that's important because the more that I have that connection to them, and I'm not just, sending emails and just sort of leaving it out there, but I'm with them daily reinforcing the behavior that I want to see, that then, to your point, aligns everybody and puts everyone on the same page. And one thing I'll say as well about the data, I try and do that quite frequently. So I have bi-weekly sales calls where I have one just with my team, and then we kind of expand it to our senior leadership team and others that want to join in that might have, be collaborating with us as a team. And for the plan for next year, I wanted to look at the verticals where we had been working for the last couple of years. And one of the we felt like we had a really strong presence in one industry in particular. But when I looked at the actual sales cycle, it was 8 months, where typically we were more on a like 2 to 2.5 month trajectory with other customers that, more of that our sweet spot, if you will. So it allowed us to sort of pivot our new business focus for next year. But to your point, showing them the data, it makes it just so much easier for them to go, okay, I understand what you're saying here and I can get on board. Because again, you also want to be able to I think, it was challenging for some of my reps that had that territory to go, why am I not moving as quickly as my peers? And then for them to see that and to have that validated and for us to make those adjustments, then they're back in that winning focus, which I think is so important to be able to listen to the AEs, but then validate it with the data that you have available to you.
Yeah, I'm absolutely buy into that, and I think you're way ahead of the curve on this stuff. When reps are underperforming, the gut reaction for a lot of sales leaders is just to get rid of them and hire a load of others. And the reality is that almost every sales seller can be a top performer, and it's our job as leaders to help them and to if they've got the fundamentals, if they are curious, if they are if they've got that drive to win, then it's our job to enable them. And actually, it's a whole lot cheaper to get the existing underperformers to perform than it is to roll the dice and go again on some people you just don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us a bit about perhaps how you might use Qstream in the front office. Do you drink your own champagne? Is it a tool you use in your own internal sales?
We do. So I'll give you just a kind of an example that comes top of mind. So when we brought in the SPICE methodology and winning by design, we actually partnered with the organization to allow us to be able to create Qstream questions so that once the team, and myself included, went through the training, everyone was enrolled in a Qstream to then reinforce what we learned in the training. And I could see immediate impact because it was right sort of Q3, Q4 last year. I actually could see immediate impact on some of the sales that we were bringing in the door for Q4. And then I seen a very strong impact this year with the team continuing to ascribe to that. And also us pivoting to make sure that internally we were aligned, like our process was aligned with the SPICE methodology, not just saying, okay, now you go use it, but making sure that how we're coaching, every conversation that we have. But what was so impactful from utilizing Qstream for that training was that I was able to see any gaps in knowledge and where the team was struggling down to, the specific rep and a specific topic to say, okay, this piece they're finding challenging. And then it also allowed me to kind of keep that in mind as we analyze deals together and talked through deals and where the support. So for me as a sales leader, I'm getting those insights in real time and then empowering my team and while reinforcing the behaviors that I want to see. So we absolutely do utilize it in-house quite frequently. We also had moved to kind of an order form that was typically, we would just fill out an order form, send it off, but we decided to embed it within our Salesforce. So everything was digitized within Salesforce, much easier and aligned to the opportunity. But it was a process and it was a whole different, change to the way that they were working. And so we created a Qstream to implement that change and make sure that everyone knew, hey, if I want to go create a new order form, here's where I go. Here's where I add my line items. Here's where I add my contact. And so, so from one standpoint, it helped us with implementing a brand new sales methodology. And then in the same, year, it also helped us to be able to implement a new process within our Salesforce hygiene. So we use it quite frequently within the company.
Yeah, I think onboarding new sales teams can be particularly painful. I don't know, is your sales team remote or do they come together? What's the format?
Yeah, so I currently have a team of 5, and they're all over the map. 2 are in the Boston area, 1 is in Canada, 1 is in Dublin, and 1 is in Barcelona. And that, yeah, so we're a global team at Qstream, which I think is exciting. And we actually have our holiday party for our US team tomorrow, our North America team, I'll say, tomorrow, and our Dublin holiday party we have to too was last week. But we travel back and forth quite frequently, and I think that just helps to kind of keep that kind of small company closeness and close knit feeling by ensuring that even though we do work in a remote capacity, that we're meeting with one another frequently, and that people feel comfortable just calling up their teammate to ask a question rather than do it through Slack or an email.
I think, again, it makes it even more important to have that consistent approach to the way that the team is selling, and onboarding a new salesperson into that team, getting them doing things in the same way as quick as possible. I mean, but the opportunity cost in not doing it right is huge, right? And if Qstream can help customers to get there a whole lot faster, then it kind of makes a whole lot of sense. And again, I saw a horrible stat the other day that in enterprise sales, the average sales individual contributor is 1.7 or 1 year, 7 months, I think it was, in enterprise selling, which is an insanely low amount of time. And the cost of onboarding, ramping, and then offboarding and going again is so expensive. And the impact on growth, on revenue is so substantial. And I think that if you get these tools right, if you can introduce that consistency, you can eliminate some of those challenges and get new people up to speed so much quicker. And the fact you're able to do it completely remotely is testament to that. So congratulations.
Thank you. Part of that strategy is and not to pitch Qstream too much, but we use it as an onboarding tool, because once all those questions are created, they're there for me to be able to enroll someone into those questions at a later date, and I can modify them to keep up with the changing landscape of our business. So we use it in-house across the company to onboard, and then that's also a primary use case for many of our customers when bringing in somebody new to their team, because as you mentioned, it's a huge investment to bringing someone up. But the faster that we can educate them, train them well, reinforce those behaviors that we want to get across, then it actually gets them on the floor much quicker, out the door, and selling and helping us with revenue and sales.
Totally get it. So we know you use Salesforce. We know that you're a fan of Qstream as well. What else have you got in your tech stack for the front office?
Yeah, so we did just move back over to SalesLoft. We had it a few years prior, so that's something that the BDR team and my team is now utilizing, and then LinkedIn Navigator as well. So those are, I think the primary tools right now that the team is utilizing. But a lot of the time we spend with customers is, quite frankly, on the phone. Getting in, if we can travel to meet them, we do our best. COVID kind of changed that, and I'm looking to push my team to meet with more customers next year, because I do see the impact on the actual business when there is that face-to-face time when possible.
I absolutely buy into that as well. Thinking of next year then, and are you able to share the goals for everyone's knee deep in 2025 planning at the moment? Can you give us some visibility of what you're aiming at for 2025?
So we're still working on our targets for next year, but significant growth is something that we are forecasting. From a retention standpoint, we do try to aim to retain on a quarterly basis 85 to 90% of our customers, which is means that we have to be highly coordinated across the teams to ensure that the product is continuing to deliver new releases, and then any issues that might come up with the platform are quickly addressed, because we know in software that can happen. And then from the services side, making sure that our customers, quite frankly, are using the platform. Usage is really one of the biggest pieces, and making sure that they like it, they're happy, and they know that all the functionality that is available to them, because that's another part of it, right? Is educating our customer base, from those junior employees all the way to the executive stakeholders. So really for us, a primary part of our plan for next year is continuing to retain our customers. And then the other focus is, yes, on new logo, but to your point earlier, expansion. How can we get, because what we find is that by bringing on other departments, other divisions within the customers we're already working with, that secures the renewal that we have maybe 2-3 quarters ahead. So we're just looking to continue to land expand for next year.
Very good. Lauren, I've really enjoyed the conversation. We have a little, at the end of every discussion, I ask a question that came up in the last podcast. And now our last guest was Sean Murray from Lead IQ, and he left us with a question of where do you think outbound is heading in the next 2 or 3 years? Do you think it's going to be email and LinkedIn and phone, or an alternative? So I'm going to ask you that one, and then I'm going to ask you for your question after that.
Sure. That's a great question, because I think it's one. So our vice president of marketing actually leads our BDR team, which has allowed me to have so sales and marketing usually close in nature, very close here at Qstream. We speak often and strategize together quite frequently. And I think that's one of the challenges that we're seeing right now, is that nobody picks up the phone anymore. Myself included. I'm guilty of that. I'm like, who's calling me? I don't know who that person is. But we have found that there are certain tactics that I think work really well. One being that I've noticed, and I'll pick up the phone if someone reaches out to me on LinkedIn and says, hey, this is who I am. So when they're calling me and they've left a voicemail, and I can remember going, oh yes, I've seen their name. They've either emailed me or they reached out to me on LinkedIn. That to me then secures, I know I'm not talking one to a spammer, right? And it has that twinge of familiarity. So I think it has to be a combination of all three, and what that most effective combination, if you can figure out the key to that would be great.
Yeah, I think that's all valid. I'm a huge fan of community and partnerships, and I think if you can find a way of getting a lukewarm introduction to somebody, it's just a so much better conversation. So I think my views all around, be clear about your qualification list or the target audience, and then do everything you can to try and get as warm an introduction as you possibly can.
And I think a big focus for us for next year as well is on our partner strategy, because we work with many partners who have their own sales methodology that they utilize Qstream to then reinforce. So we get that exposure from those companies that are using Qstream through our partner business. And then, the nice thing is we have such great relationships with our partners. They say, well, if you're interested in bringing something like this, if you're missing micro-learning from your tech stack, we're using Qstream for this particular trainings. So that warm introduction, where it's like that friend of a friend, I think really helps us in the long run as well. So to your point, what are other strategies of that outbound focus? I think that partner channel is critical.
No, I absolutely buy into that. And the data tells us the same. We saw just 20% of organizations have a proper structured partner program in place. And just 10% of leads are coming in through partners, but they represent over 30% of revenue that we're seeing coming through. So the conversion rates are so much higher when it comes from a warm, trusted lead. So I buy into that. So final point, need you to come up with a question for our next guest. So any thoughts?
One of the notes that I took, because I think it's a common challenge for sales leaders, but it's around building a culture of accountability. So I'm always curious as to how other sales leaders are building that culture of accountability. So we're all in the same boat. We're all rowing together. What are your tactics for reinforcing that? Is that an okay one?
Fantastic. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. If people that are listening here want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Sure. They can add me on LinkedIn or directly message me at lauren.boynton@qstream.com.
Very good. And if you reach out to Lauren on LinkedIn and mention the podcast, I'm sure she's more likely to accept your invite. So, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. I learned a lot today. Really enjoyed the session, and thank you for all your input.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Revenue Insights from Ebsta. If you want to learn more from some of the brightest minds on how to predictably and efficiently grow revenue, then subscribe to our newsletter. We'll deliver actionable insights straight to your inbox. Go to ebsta.com/newsletter. See you soon.